now for the Redbird Report Podcast with the TV voice of the Cards, Danny Mac, and Cards World Series champion Brad Thompson on 101 ESPN.
Along with Brad Thompson, I'm Dan McLaughlin. This is the Redbird Report, our podcast talking everything baseball. Specifically, we're talking Cardinal baseball, and I'm originating from San Francisco. Brad is in St. Louis, and he's got a big show at the Fast Lane today, and really the station celebrating the life of Chris Duncan, our late, great colleague. And for you, Brad, first of all, great to see you and visit with you over the computer, but your former teammate as well, and I know this is always a special day that you look forward to.
Yeah, it is, man. I would love to be with you in San Francisco doing the game, but it is a special day. We always celebrate Dunk's birthday, Cinco de Mayo. You know Dunk very well. So Cinco de Mayo was a pretty darn good birthday for my man Dunk. And it's going to be a fun day today. We're recording this earlier in the day, but today on the show, we're going to be talking to Dave Duncan is going to join us, Shelly Duncan, his brother. His wife, Amy, is going to be with us, Skip Schumacher, Ryan Ludwig, among others. So a lot of people just celebrating Dunk and his birthday. And dude, Dunk he seems to come up somehow, some way every single time we do a show. Like somebody either sends in a text or we have a story that ends up coming around and getting to him. So just a great day to be able to celebrate, and we're excited to do it. I was going to ask you, do you remember the first time you met Dunk?
Oh, yeah. It was a very quick meeting, too. I just went up to him, and I said, hey, congratulations. You've made it to the big leagues. And you know how Dunk was. He was kind of like, kind of jumpy and stuff. He's like, oh, yeah. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. And I said, well, at some point, okay, gotcha. And then he was out. And that was it. But my favorite was, and I've told this a million times, but Dunk and I were doing some pre- and post games. And I just said to him, I said, man, you're excellent at this stuff. Like, you're really good. Like, and I'd gotten to know him a little bit, and so now I could give him some trouble and have fun with him and realize the kind of guy that he was. Because here's the thing, Brad, when you guys play, I say this all the time, and you know this better than anybody. When you play and you're a player, you're locked in on saving your ass. You're trying to make sure that you have a job. So
you got that right.
Yeah. So talking to me or talking to you now in this role, yeah, they're very accommodating and they'll do it. Some are better than others, but have the understanding that they're worried about facing the pitcher that night or you trying to get Ken Griffey Jr. out that night because you might have to. And so I get it. I go in with that mindset of, hey, this is their job, and I totally understand it, and here I am bugging them. But Dunk says to me, and we're getting done doing one of our post games, and he broke down a hitter, the pitcher, and the umpire. And it was great because he knew the umpire, and he said, hey, here's what happened in that at bat. He said, this guy went in, he got the call in, Yachty went in even further. Yachty's got a great relationship with the umpire. By the way, earlier in the game, the umpire didn't like the young kid that was at the plate. Yachty took advantage of it, and then we just went sequence to sequence to sequence of each pitch, and he broke it down. Beyond just how did he get him out, he said, here's the human element of the game. Here's the umpire who is going to make a point. And I hadn't really thought about that when I was watching it. And so we get done, and I said, man, you're just great at this. And I said, but why couldn't I really talk to you as a player? And he said, Dan, I had no problem with you. Matter of fact, I really liked you. Papa Dunk, he liked you. He goes, the whole family, we liked you. He does one of those. He goes, but I was just really worried about just catching a fly ball. I was just worried about catching a fly ball. I said, worry about catching a fly ball? I said, you're a major leaguer. He goes, Dan, did you see me play defense? I said, point is valid. Yes, you should have been worried about catching a fly ball. So I love that story with him. And that kind of summed it up to me, is that very intense, driven to be a great player. And he was a very good player in the major leagues with tremendous power, but when you're buried behind Albert Pujols in the system, you got to learn another job. And I don't think we ever gave him enough credit, Brad, on the other side of this, of growing up being Dave Duncan's son and Dave Duncan being on the staff. If Dave Duncan was the pitching coach in Cincinnati or Chicago or whatever, and he's playing in St. Louis, that's a different story. But to be his son and then to play for that team and the nepotism stuff and, you grew up with Tony and you grew up with your dad and you're in the club, all that stuff. Well, no, he was a very good major league player that could hit bombs. And if he played in today's day and age in games, oh, my gosh, he's the prototypical 2022 player. He'd be perfect.
He would be perfect. And I think you hit on a very important point there with Dunk. A lot of people look at his situation with Dave as his father and said, oh, well, harder. It made it way harder on him. The expectations, everybody thinking that he didn't earn different things. I know this. He earned us a World Series ring.
That's
2006. Right. We don't win a World Series if Chris Duncan doesn't do what he did coming up and supplying some power when we needed it most in 2006. So, like, I love telling stories about him. I love talk about him with the fly balls, being concerned about that. A couple quick ones before we get on to the Cardinals right now, because they got a series against the Giants, and I know a game you got to get ready for. But we were playing in Chicago, and you know that the newspaper, it's a little satire newspaper called The Heckler that they used to have.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
Oh, dude, it was great. It was great. So
I got ripped in that too, I think. So it's all good.
Dude, if you got ripped, you're doing something right.
Exactly.
Because, it's you got under their skin a little bit. Well, Dunk, unfortunately, it just didn't happen very often, but he might have boxed a fly ball. And in the Heckler, the next day, there was a picture of Dunk under a ball, like waiting for it, but he had his two hands were cinder blocks, and they had him like that in the Heckler, and he laughed his ass off. Like Dunk, as competitive as he was, like he could take the joy in that. And then we had another one in New York, which kind of sounds like the same story due to the fact that Dunk might have misplayed a fly ball in the outfield. And in New York, you know how long it takes to get to the stadium if you drive, right? If you end up taking a cab, it takes over an hour. If you take the subway, it's quick. Well, Dunk found himself on the cover of the sports page again. But this time, the real sports page, it was him. You see the ball on the ground. You see him look defeated. So we're all on the subway together, probably 4 or 5 of us. And I always had a newspaper with me. I always doing the crosswords or whatever. But I saw a Dunk on this one, so I figured I would make a little bit of a show out of it on the subway. You know how you just pull out the newspaper and you slap it like, here we go. Let's see what's here. And then I gave a look at the front of the sports page and looked at Dunk. And Dunk's not sneaking in anywhere. He's huge. So I look at him, I'm like, oh, my gosh, is this you? And everybody on the subway's like, oh, that's him. I think he was mad at me for a minute because he wasn't happy about boxing the fly ball. But the guy, this, everybody, Dan, if you make a mistake because it was effort-based, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And Dunk didn't make mental mistakes. He might make some physical mistakes. He would also run through a wall. This day is so special to be able to talk about him on what would have been his 41st birthday. So excited to celebrate it on the radio today. And look, there's going to be so many funny stories. I always find myself generally crying because I'm laughing so hard with some of these stories. So hope to make it a celebration today.
Yeah, no, it's going to be emotional for you and for Anthony and for those that were very close with him at 101 ESPN. It kind of leads into this. We're going to find out if Juan Yepez can play the outfield. You're not going to play. You're not going to play first base. You're going to play. Let me put it to you this way. If he continues to hit, he's going to play. The Cardinals need offense, clearly. When you look at what's happening here, they're pitching well. Got a great start again from Adam Wainwright. He's just up there flipping old Uncle Charlie and getting soft contact and 15 ground balls and 1 hit in 7 innings. Old Uncle Charlie's, mixing and matching and doing his thing. You got Miles going tonight, so your pitching has been good. Your bullpen's been really good for the most part. But now you're trying to find offense. So Yepez gets the call. Sosa is on the COVID IL. And I'm excited for the kid. He gets a couple of doubles yesterday. Bloop doubles, doesn't matter. Put it in play. And I think Oli and the staff, I think their mindset is, Brad, at this point, if you come up or if you're in that lineup and you perform and you hit, you'll be in there the next day. It's performance-based, so Juan Yepez is going to get a shot, and it's going to be fun.
Yeah, it is. They're looking for a spark, and however that spark comes, and I agree with you. I don't care in what fashion those doubles were hit. There were a couple of doubles, and he was able to find himself on base, and I really enjoyed that. I loved it after his second one where he hit it. I mean, you couldn't have dropped it more perfectly on the line, and he just put his hands out like, well, I don't know. What? It happens. That's hitting. But this is a guy, I mean, he had 27 home runs in the minor leagues last year. He added 7 more in the Arizona Fall League. He had 9 before he ended up getting called up. Actually hit his 9th on the day he did get called up. well, the day he was supposed to get called up due to the fact that he got stuck in Washington and didn't make his flight. But I'm excited for him. I'm excited for the opportunity because this offense, and we've talked about it every which way, it's stagnant, man. They need somebody and something to spur a little something. And just kind of shifting the conversation a little bit here off of Yepez for a second, I liked how Oli mixed up his lineup yesterday. Tyler ONeill, there was only so long you could put him in the 3-hole. You had to do something else. You had to move him. They moved him to 6. And what happened to him? Well, he responded, right? I like what Oli did.
Yeah, I think right now, Oli, in looking at the lineup, there's frustration. Understanding that you're waiting for DeYoung, you're waiting for ONeill, you're waiting for Dylan Carlson to be the guys that you've seen before. But as we've seen also from a year ago, you can't wait too long. I mean, the Cardinals had to have a 17-game winning streak bail them out of what was for about a month and a half a really poor year that buried them for a while, and then they crawled themselves out of that hole and made it to postseason play. I just get the feeling, Brad, that Oli is not going to wait that long. I don't think the front office will wait that long. And you've given guys a run of a month plus, and they're going to have to perform. And if not, you're going to try to find some other ways to generate offense. And we're talking about offense here. We're not talking about a lack of defense. We're not talking about guys that aren't showing up and not giving effort. They are. It's just about you have to perform, and that means offensively. And so I think this road trip is very important for some of those guys we mentioned to get it going. And if not, after the off day, you kind of catch your breath on Monday. It's 20 days and 20 games. That'll be done. And then see what you have going into next week's homestand. Would you agree?
The hard part, yeah, I would. I would. The hard part is, like, where is that line? And what does it look like?
Well, you know what it is. I mean, it's everybody talking about Nolan Gorman.
Sure. And then with that line, it's like, okay, well, how much time do you end up giving that individual? What in fact do you do with Paul DeYoung? I was going to ask you, actually, do you think that this might be a series where we actually see Tommy Edman at shortstop? Even though Sosa's not available currently, I could see Tommy Edman at short and maybe even Donovan at second base.
Yeah, I think it's on the table. Put it that way. I definitely think it's on the table. I want to go back to Gorman for a second. So if he comes up, he's going to play second. Then obviously you would make that transition with Tommy at short. The one thing about Nolan Gorman, I was looking at his numbers, and we've talked about this. His strikeout rate is pretty high. It's jumped back up. He's in the mid to high 30s, I believe, with all the power that he's giving you, which is fine. If you're going to get all that power, you trade off the strikeouts. That's the way the game is played now. However, in your experience, Brad, when guys make that jump from even level to level, but let's go, specifically with AAA to Major League Baseball, how much do you think that strikeout rate jumps, generally speaking, for some of these hitters?
10%, potentially. I mean, there's some. It's for Gorman, and I went back and watched some of his at bats here recently too. A lot of his are swing and miss out of the zone. It's not like he's getting called a ton. I won't say it doesn't happen to him, but a ton of borderline pitches. When you have a guy that has really good strike zone recognition, oftentimes getting to the big leagues is like the best thing that could happen to him, because those balls that are in Memphis that are getting called a strike, that are one ball off the plate, they're going to be a ball in the big leagues most of the time. But most of his stuff is pitch recognition, swing and miss, and pitchers don't make as many mistakes. So I could easily see him striking out 40% of the time, early on when he comes up. But my thing is with that, you have a desperate need for power. You have a desperate need of a complement from the left side. And as a ball club, you strike out less than anybody else in baseball. Right. I think that you could handle having a guy like Nolan Gorman, in that lineup. So there's going to be trials, and there's going to be trials defensively too. And it's not, and it won't even be, in my opinion, it won't even be what Nolan Gorman doesn't do. He'll probably do everything that he's asked of. It's what Tommy Edman did better than he did at the position. That will be glaring to me. Yeah,
you bring up a great point. I mean, that's the one thing with the offense. If you're looking for some of the bright spots, they are not striking out as a team collectively. And you're right. With a guy like Gorman, maybe you live with that to have him walk into a 2 or 3 run homer and win you a game. Speaking of home runs, by the way, if I had to make my MVP ballot right now, it's Nolan Arenado. And now I may be biased. I watch him play every day. But if you look at the numbers, and if you took his stuff out of the line, you took him out of the lineup, I'm not sure where the Cardinals would be. You'd
be closer to the Reds than the Brewers.
No question. this guy is accounting for like 35% of your home runs, almost 30 to 40% of runs batted in or whatever the case may. I mean, he has just been incredible at this start, and he said I was going to make adjustments, and you see it too, Brad. Remember some of the pitches that he was yanking foul, hammered him, but yanked him foul. Now it's like the barrel is staying a little bit longer through the zone and gets the full extension, and then you see the damage done. The guy has just been a one-man wrecking crew. He's been awesome.
So when I watch Nolan Arenado, I try to think of myself as a pitcher. How would I end up attacking him? You're seeing him with pitches even on the outer half, Dan, where he's trying to pull them. And your first thought is, okay, well, if you're going to try to pull that pitch outside, I'm going to take advantage of you inside. Good freaking luck, because people are trying right now, and his hands are so fast, and he's able to get to anything inside. And you broke down really well during a broadcast that we did over the Arizona series of his feet, and how the feet are constantly in motion, and how he kind of picked that up. It was from Tulowitzki, correct?
Right. 2015 with Troy Tulowitzki.
And that just allows him to get to a lot of different pitches. Every once in a while, maybe you get caught in between, but it doesn't seem to happen very often for him because of how quick his hands are. I just don't know exactly how I'd pitch him. And I actually do. I'm pitching around him, and I'm making somebody else beat me.
Yes.
And that, again, that's where it comes to that DH spot, or at least what has been the DH spot, generally fifth. Now, we did see Albert Pujols hit fourth in the DH spot yesterday against the Royals, but protection is going to be a big key for him, because yesterday in the lineup, your three guys that have been hitting were 1, 2, 3 in Edman and Goldie and Arenado. You're going to need more. You're going to need more protection. You're going to make sure that somebody else is going to beat me. If I'm the Giants, if I'm in there getting ready for this series, that's exactly what I'm telling my guys. Like, that guy better not be the reason we lose this series.
I think the Giants are fascinating. I got to be honest. I mean, watching them last year and looking at the lineup that they rolled out, and I look at the lineup, I watched their game against the Dodgers last night, and this is no disrespect whatsoever to the Giants, but it's not the Dodger lineup. It's not the mashers that you would think that would get you 100+ wins, which they had last year. But they did such an excellent job with the matchups and mixing and matching righty, lefty, looking at the optimum position to put a player in, and they all thrived. I mean, they found something that clicked with just about every guy. I was doing a bunch of research on this and how they used him. Gabe Kapler did a hell of a job in doing that, and again, they're good this year, Brad, and they should be in the thick of it. Obviously, you've added another wild card, so I would anticipate them being in contention for the playoffs and certainly for the National League West. But, man, they get it done, don't they? They find a way to get it done. I think these 4 games will be fascinating to see both the managers, too, and how they manage this series. Because this is kind of, when we saw that Oli was named manager, to me, I read into some of the things that were said about how Oli may change some lineups and do some different things, look for matchups. Well, this was kind of the example, the Giants, of how they did it. And I wonder if Oli will do a little bit of that this weekend.
You could very well see it. You know how it is when you're trying to do stuff like that. The concept of it, of having all these optimal matchups, the concept is great. It's having a roster that can actually do it,
exactly,
which makes it difficult. Like everybody said, hey, do what the Giants did last year, right, for the Cardinals. You did not have pieces where you could match up that way. You just simply didn't have it. I think you do have a little bit more flexibility with your roster this year. But I really think, and a lot of people that are going to be watching the broadcast tonight and over the weekend will be looking at their roster and say, who the hell is Tyro Estrada? Or
right.
Who are some of these guys? Mauricio Dubon? Well, I don't know who any of these guys are. Well,
and that's my point. Yes.
It is. And they put them in a good position to succeed. And you know what we've seen the Giants do this year, too. So what's been the biggest talking point in baseball so far to this point? It's been the lack of offense, right? The lack of home runs. Well, and the Cardinals fit into this a little bit, too. The Giants, you've seen them swiping more bags. Now, the Cardinals lead all of baseball when it comes to stolen bases. So you're going to see that a little bit more, I would think, in this series. And you know what else they do? They actually, and I'm going to use a bad word in 2022 right here, they bunt.
Yes.
They actually bunt. 10 bunts for hits like the Giants have. That is a part of their game. They're not afraid that you see a big shift, they'll drop it down, and there's no ego in that. Like, I kind of dig it.
I love it. I mean, you know me, Brad. I'm a St. Louis guy. I don't know if you knew that. I hardly ever bring that up. And from South St. Louis and grew up
7 minutes away from the ballpark.
That's right.
Oh,
right.
8.
7, 8, depending on who was driving that day. But, yeah, if it was my dad, we might have been there in 2. So watching the teams of the 80s, and again, it's about personnel, right? You had Vince, you had Willie, you had Ozzie, you had Terry Pendleton. You had guys that could move, bunt, and play the game at that time, that kind of game. But, man, it was entertaining. And you and I were doing the games this past homestand, and they were doing a little bit of that. That is fun for me. That's activity. That's action in the game. That's also, when you talk about the game, putting pressure on the defense. How many times do we say, boy, these guys are going to get tight because you feel the pressure of this bunt or a hit and run or those kind of – never. So why not do that? And I think Oli may have to do that with this lineup currently constructed. If they don't hit, you're going to have to get creative. And maybe that's some of the things that they do.
You know how crappy some of the defenses are out there?
Yes.
Like, seriously, you watch a lot of baseball.
You sacrifice. I was flipping around last night. Okay, now you got me going.
Did you get to the Phillies?
Yeah. You see Joe Girardi getting booed? Welcome to Philly. But, yeah, I mean, you're sacrificing all the defense and the nuances of the game to find the guys that can pop you the 3-run homer. And that's just the way the game's played, right or wrong. But I think, and I've been saying this, I don't know if I'm right. I bet if there's an analytics guy listening, they're going to say I'm crazy. I do think there's a place for it. I think that if you don't have the personnel to hit the home runs like that, or the game is changing, the ball is dead, the humidor is doing whatever it's doing, then change on the fly. You got to adapt. Now, there are ways to do it, and people say, why don't you bunt anymore? And I've asked people that, and they say, well, good luck. Go try to bunt against Jordan Hicks. He throws 100 miles an hour with, a sinker that moves 2 feet. I get it. It's not easy to do.
It's not as easy as it looks,
exactly.
For sure.
But I do think there's a place for it, and I do think that if you see the metrics and the game is going this way, you adjust on the fly. That's just how I would do it.
So I think, and again, in this, you'll see in the game, you'll see a shift, a big shift against Nolan Arenado. I don't want Nolan to bunt.
There's some guys I don't want to see bunting.
I don't want you to bunt. You know what? Harrison Bader, I do. I think that Harrison Bader should be spending hours upon hours in the cage working on that craft. Harrison is a really good ball player, but that bunt tool is not really there for him.
No, it's not.
Or at least not as consistent as it should be for a guy that has his type of speed. I know he's got gap-to-gap power. I also believe he could pop 20-plus home runs a year and be fine, but I think that that's an added element and something that might be there for him, especially when offenses are struggling.
Well, here's the thing about Harrison, too, is that teams are shifting on him because he opens up, and it's going to show. The metrics show it, too. He's going to pull everything. But that first time that you push a bunt to the right side is now the next time that you're going to see a different shift with the defense. Now, they may be leaning towards second base, but you might open up a hole on that side because you kept him honest. The second baseman has got to be on that side of the bag. Even showing it, just show it. Maybe not get it down, but just show that you're trying to push it that way. Might open up something. So it's something to think about, I think, with your thought process there with Harrison.
Yeah, well, with him, and he's not the only one. I just use him as an
sure.
example of a guy that can really utilize his speed. Look, Dylan Carlson, he's struggling mightily with the bat. You see an opening, drop one down.
Yeah.
Maybe that gets something going for you. Get on base, spark the team, have a little energy there, because Dylan Carlson has not looked good at that plate. He's hitting $186, he's slugging .252, and he just has not hit his groove yet.
Soft contact, everything.
Yeah.
Everything's been soft contact.
If you want to see a horror story, go look at his Baseball Savant page. I mean, it ain't great right now. A lot of blue. Blue's not good if you're not familiar with Baseball Savant. So, yeah, you're right. None of the hard hit stuff is there. You and I are both huge believers in Dylan Carlson. And the organization are huge believers in Dylan Carlson. He's going to be just fine. But it's been a slow start. So what do you do to be able to jumpstart yourself a little bit if you're him? Maybe it is a little bit more of the small ball.
All right, let's wrap it up with this. It's Michaelis going today. This guy, he's gotten Alcantara, he had Scherzer, and then he had Merrill Kelly. So those are the last three that he's been matched up with. And he's gone toe-to-toe with those guys and given the club a chance to win those games. We've talked about, well, what was a key going into the season? How about a healthy Miles Michaelis being 1 or 2 on that list? Not only is he healthy, Brad, but he's pitching better than he was when he was an 18-game winner. So we're seeing the best right now, I think, of Miles going into this start tonight.
And Miles might end up giving you 200 innings this year. That could very well happen. And we know how rare of a feat that is. It was 206 and 2/3, I believe it was, or a third that Adam Wainwright gave the organization last year. You just don't see too many guys doing that. But 7 1/3 last time out against Arizona, 7 innings last time out against the Mets. You're right. He's drawing the best of the best when he's going out there. And when I watch him, I look at a guy that's healthy, first of all. Like, he is free. He is easy. He's talked about how good he feels and how long it's been since he felt that way. And it's another, you mentioned Adam Wainwright earlier, his 15 ground ball outs. That's Michaelis to me. It's weak contact. He can get his strikeouts, Dan, when he really wants to, if he's, get somebody to 2 strikes. But that is never the goal, or at least it shouldn't be the goal. Let's get outs as quickly as possible, and he's doing that with each and every one of his pitches.
Hey, buddy, this is fun. Love doing this with you, and I'm sure we'll catch up either Monday or Tuesday of next week. We'll do a couple a week at least, and love doing this, and it should be a fun series here in San Francisco.
Hey, you have fun in San Francisco. Enjoy the city, and hopefully we enjoy a series win.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to having you tuned in and talking about Chris Duncan, our good friend, and I know one of your best friends, and you wouldn't be in this business without him. I know he got you going, so looking forward to that.
No, it's going to be a fun day celebrating the life of Dunk, and we'll tell some stories, and we'll have a good time.
All right, buddy. That's Brad Thompson. I'm Dan McLaughlin, and this is our podcast, The Redbird Report. Wherever you may get your podcast, make sure and click on us, download it, and we'll talk a little Cardinal baseball for you. Thanks for tuning in on The Redbird Report.
You've been listening to the Redbird Report Podcast with the TV voice of the Cards, Danny Mac, and Cards World Series champion Brad Thompson on 101 ESPN.